Mark Twain said that politicians are like diapers. They should be changed often and for the same reason. To say that politicians are corrupt is to repeat yourself. It's like talking about wet rain or cold snow. You're not adding any additional information. But does that mean that every politician is corrupt? Of course not. Of course there are exceptions. But that's just it. They're exceptions. Why aren't we talking about all those noble, honest, trustworthy, and humble people who serve us in politics? Except for those few corrupt ones that have given them a bad name. But does politics attract corrupt people? I've read that it does, but I'm inclined to think that people don't go into politics so they can take advantage of the system and for their own personal benefit. But a system that encourages and insists that people promote themselves to even get there, and that essentially requires them to spend huge amounts of time and just raising money, is certainly inspiring behavior that is leading people in the wrong direction. I would, however, consider politics one of the hardest jobs there is. I don't mean that they're debating and deciding political issues. What is so hard is the responsibility of handling the money of an entire nation, or a state, or a city, or whatever, and not use it for one's own personal benefit. The reliance on other people for their money or support, and then not rewarding those same people with benefits at the public expense in ways that are not in the public interest. Politics brings temptations and expectations that few people can handle without bending or breaking. The lawmakers make the laws, and the temptation to make laws that benefit themselves over others is just very hard to resist. So if politicians are corrupt, just how does this affect everybody else? What difference does it make? The biggest way that political corruption affects everybody else is that it makes government cost more than it should. And remember, government doesn't make its own money. The only money it has is what it takes from you, which leaves you less to spend on what you think is important, like your bills, a new car, or your kid's college fund. The more money government needs, the less money you have for yourself. Prosperity isn't just making more money, it is keeping more of what you already have. Politicians hire people they don't need. They pay them more than they should. They spend money they don't have, using your money as if it was their own, for things that benefit them first rather than you. Bank robbers wear masks and carry guns. Politicians don't have to. They can just vote themselves the money. And they usually don't have to worry about losing their jobs. They rig that as well by creating voting districts that favor their party, and they have their entire time in office to raise even more money so as to put any challenger at a deep disadvantage. Besides, they don't actually have to take possession of the money. They just have the power to use it, which is all you really need anyway. The state of Illinois has unpaid bills of about $6 billion and future obligations of around $100 billion. That money has to come from somewhere, and that can only come through higher taxes, which is less money for everyone else. Of course, those who work for government, whether elected or otherwise, get paid first, and they make sure that they are paid very well. The federal government is over $18 trillion in debt. They still want to raise your taxes, but don't care quite as much as the state would because they can print money or borrow money seemingly forever. The end result, however, is that the money you already have and will earn will be continually losing value. Christianity makes better politicians or politicians less susceptible to corruption. Are Christians perfect or immune from corruption? Of course not. We're talking about humans here. But Christianity understands temptations and provides at least four of the strongest safeguards against it. First, probably the single most important factor in resisting temptation is having clearly defined boundaries. A boundary is what you have learned and decided before the fact about what is good and right, values that you believe in. You know that temptations provide some immediate gratification, but in the long run will bring sorrow and loss. When faced with some temptation, you also need to have a reason or reasons why not to do it. A reason that you believe in, a reason that you find convincing. Without that, the temptation can pull you right over. This is something that generally requires a comprehensive worldview that provides you the big picture of life, how things are supposed to be, the ultimate goals of the things that you want, and know to be what is best. Without that, when faced with something very enticing, you will have no good reason not to go along with it. But with this comprehensive worldview, when a temptation presents itself, it will then be immediately seen as a path leading to a dead end with regrettable consequences. And the lure will lose its attraction. In fact, most situations that can be regarded as temptations will not even be tantalizing, or may even be perceived as temptations, because the right course of action will be clear, and the consequences of giving in will be clearly understood beforehand. This is not to say that Christians don't fall into temptation or give into it. When they do, it is usually more of the impulsive kind, the sins of the flesh. Hardly ever is it the intentional, long-term deception that which extends far beyond temporary emotions. We all know, of course, about the ongoing scandals with the Catholic Church and its priests. My only response is, what were they thinking when they decided that all of the religious leaders had to be celibates? There are priests in the Bible, and their lives are just as much of living symbols as the priests today are supposed to be. And they were married. Marriage is God's plan for humans, and with few exceptions. And insisting that those who want to serve God the most in the Catholic Church have to make a lifelong decision to be celibate, and usually at a very young age, sure looks like a mistake to me. But then few priests go into politics anyway. Christians are constantly taught to strive to be like Jesus in all they do. And they're made to be acutely conscious of the times when they fail. A big part of being Christian is the wanting to do the right thing. Christians are aware of their weaknesses, but they generally have a very clear sense of what is right and wrong. Secondly, resisting temptation is more than just being against something. One needs a higher value that one is working toward, like an athlete who gladly gives up the party life so that he can do well in the competition. The highest value in the Christian life is to love, or is love. Love for God and love for people. Love is not just a warm, fuzzy feeling, but a desire and intent to do good for others, even at great cost to oneself. A sacrificial giving, as Jesus gave them an example by his death for us all. Do all Christians succeed in this? No, of course not. Well, this is what they are taught, what the Bible teaches, and what you should expect from any person who calls himself a Christian. Thirdly, Christians also believe that God has given them his Spirit to work on the inside of them to enable them to do the right thing. Do Christians all unfailingly draw on this power to live lives that are exemplary? No, of course not. They're still human. But this is what Christianity teaches. And the vast majority know what it means to have the Spirit of God empowering them to be more than what they would be otherwise. And then, Christians believe that all of us are accountable to God. Yes, Christians believe that they have been forgiven of all past sins and continually are being forgiven as they inevitably fall, but they know quite well that God isn't going to overlook any intentional misdoings on their part. Heck, they get worried even when they do good things, wondering if their motives were really right. Mark Twain has made his comment about politicians and diapers a long time ago, long before our nation officially became a secular nation. There was no official pronouncement of that fact, but it was the 1960s that our country essentially changed directions, and government debt not only has been steadily increasing, but growing at a faster rate as time goes on. Does this increased debt necessarily mean increased corruption? Or that is it a necessary result of secularism? Not at all, but it certainly makes it more important than ever that we elect people more able and more likely to resist the unique temptations that politicians face. Christianity is what makes that possible. Thank you.